Let's talk about the value of Christian friendship. As we face pitfalls on our journey to heaven, somebody tell me a little bit more about the value of Christian friendship. It can help encourage you very much. Very much. What else? The value of Christian friendship.
I think the most important things for me are accountability and encouragement.
Yes. Yeah. A good friend loves you enough to encourage you, and a good friend loves you enough to keep you accountable, keep you from sin. What else? An example to follow. Sure. Yeah. If you're blessed with someone who can provide you an example to follow, somebody to imitate. Apostle Paul said, "Follow me as I follow Jesus."
I think that just the sheer joy and fun.
Yeah.
The enjoyment of friendship.
Yeah.
I think is a picture of like heaven.
Yeah. Friends equate to joy and laughter and happiness. Yeah.
There's gifts and strengths they have that pick you up where you're weak and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's mutual strengthening. Sure.
Related to that, when you're going through very hard times, they help anchor you, they help bear your burdens.
Yes. Carry one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Sure.
With the Christian friends, debate the Bible, which can also help strengthen.
Yeah. Like Christian and Hopeful near the end of the book, they're getting some good old healthy debate. And they love each other, and it all ended up being strengthening for one another. Sure enough.
You can spur one another.
Yes, spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Share each other's burdens. Share sins with one another.
Also great to worship together.
Yeah, yes, sure enough. Yes, praying together. Absolutely. Yep. And as Bunyan wrote in Pilgrim's Progress, Christian would not have made it all the way to the celestial city without some friends. Now, some are a little bit stronger friends than others, but lots of friends. So let's give a list of Christian's friends. Who was the first friend he met? Evangelist. Yeah, Evangelist was a good friend that kept repeating to Christian the gospel and even warning him and even saying things like, one of you may not make it out of Vanity Fair, and yet just all along the way, Evangelist becomes a faithful friend. And who else? Faithful friend. The very reason, why his name is Faithful is to show he was a man of faith, but he was also faithful to his friend, faithful to Christian. And we are called to be that to one another. And then, of course, we've got who? Hopeful. And hopeful is like that friend that doesn't let you quit. That friend who won't let you give up. That friend that you just need when you're at the end of your rope. And he's going to make it. And hopeful, even though he became a believer later than Christian, he became a much stronger believer than Christian. If that makes sense. To the end, hopeful is dragging Christian, as we'll see, into heaven with him, And I love that picture of that friendship. What are some minor friends along the way?
Watchful.
What's that? Watchful. Yeah. Others? Charity. Yeah, and piety. Any others that you can think of along the way? Goodwill. Yep. Help. Yeah, you find that sometimes the Lord may not keep someone in your life very long. And sometimes it may be very brief. But it's just the right person at the right time to help you in your time of need. And that's okay, right? Because what we learn in our life and in the story of Christian in Pilgrim's Progress is the Lord determines the length of the friendships, who the friendships are, the value of friends. Some come in and out, some stay for a lifetime. And we praise God for that. Okay, we're going to read last chapter together. And I'll read along and we'll just pause on occasion for some discussion. So, Christian and Hopeful have made it through the enchanted forest, and now they are entering into the land just before the celestial city. And it's called Beulah Lane. Anybody want to sing? Beulah Lane, I'm coming for you. That's on tape. We get that? Chris is like, we got that. We got it. And someday, okay, I'll stop. Now I saw in my dream that Christian and Hopeful were beyond the enchanted ground and now had entered the country of Beulah. Since the way, and at least in my translation, the way is always capitalized W-A-Y, which is a reference not just to the journey, but it's a reference to Jesus, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Since the way went directly through it, the way of Christ, they stopped to refresh themselves for a while. The air there was very sweet and pleasant, and they listened to the singing of the birds and watched the beautiful new flowers appear every day, and I listened to the song of the turtle dove. The sun was shining day and night, and they were beyond the valley of the shadow of death, as well as beyond the reach of giant despair. In fact, you could not do so much as even see Doubting Castle from there. However, they were within sight of the celestial city, and they met some who lived there. In this land, Beulah, the angels frequently walked because it was located on the very borders of heaven. Also, in this land, the contract between the bride and the bridegroom was renewed. And who is the bride? The church. The bridegroom? Jesus. Yes, here, as the bridegroom rejoices over her bride, so does God rejoice over them. Now, in this land, they had no lack of grain and wine, for they reaped more than they could ever possibly imagine receiving throughout their entire pilgrimage. Here, they heard loud voices from outside of the city saying, "Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your salvation comes. Behold, his reward is with him." And all the inhabitants of the country called them the holy people, the redeemed of the Lord, sought out. They walked in this land rejoicing more than they had during any other part of their journey. As they drew closer to the celestial city, they had a more perfect view of it. It was built of pearls and precious stones, and its streets were paved with pure gold. The natural glory of the city and the reflection of the sunbeams upon it made both Christian and Hopeful homesick for it. They stood for a while, crying out in pain, "If you see my beloved, tell him I am lovesick." It comes from Song of Solomon. So what is happening the closer that Christian and hopeful get to the gates of heaven? They're what? They're what kind of sickness is it? Lovesick. Alex is looking at me like, lovesick? What is that? Maybe homesick? Does that help to be homesick? Okay, very much. Okay, good. What else is happening the closer they get to heaven?
They've grown tired of this world.
They are forgetting the joys and the cares of this world. The closer they get to heaven, the more and more that they desire it. The closer you get, the more you want it. And the more you begin to experience and taste, the more that you recognize how good it is. Taste and see that the Lord is good. After being strengthened some and better able to endure their sickness, they walked on their way and came near and near to the celestial city. On either side there were orchards and vineyards and gardens, and their gates opened up into the highway. And when they had come closer to these places, they found the gardener there standing in the path. So they asked him, "Who do these beautiful vineyards and gardens belong to?" And the gardener said, "Why, they are the king's gardens, and they are planted here for his own pleasure, as well as for the comfort and refreshment of pilgrims." The gardener led them into the vineyards and told them to eat all the fruit and grapes that they wanted. He also showed them the king's walkways and the shaded areas that the king enjoyed. Then they laid down and they slept in perfect peace for a while. So what's the difference between the other sleepings and this sleeping? Yes, no danger, no abrupt awaking. Yes, this finally they could rest. Perfect sleep. When's the last time where you couldn't sleep because you were troubled? Last night. When was the last time you had restless sleep? Yeah. When was the last time where you woke up because your heart was troubled? Yeah, we have this all the time, right? And when was the last time you just had perfect rest? Yeah, I'm struggling to think about that for me. Well, they finally laid down and they slept in the perfect peace of the king of the garden. Now, I noticed in my dream that Christian and hopeful talked more in their sleep at this time than at any other point in their journey. They actually talked in their sleep. Anybody do that? A couple of you? My son didn't raise his hand, but he talks in his sleep, and it's a little scary. He even will look at you and still be asleep and talk to you, and his eyes are like a zombie. It's very scary. And anyway, they're talking in their sleep, and it says, "As I was wondering why, the gardener said to me, 'Why are you wondering about this matter? It's the nature of the fruit of the grapes of these vineyards to go down so sweetly as to cause the lips of those who are asleep to speak of the glories that await them.'" And so here they are, and they're just on the verge of entering into the celestial city. I mean, they can see the gates of heaven right before them. And now everything that they begin to experience, it gives them this greater desire for what is to come, and everything that they experience gives them such a less desire from them that which they're leaving. I'm very much reminded of another similar story that C.S. Lewis wrote, and it's part of a whole series of stories called the Chronicles of Narnia. Anybody read? Have you read all of them? All right. Do you remember the story called The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, where Caspian and his brave crew, and the bravest of his crew was who? Little Reepicheep, right, the mouse. And Lucy and Edmund and their mean old cousin Eustace got caught up, and were almost drowning in the sea, and they caught up by the Dawn Treader, and they were on this journey with him, and the ship was traveling to the end of the earth. All kind of crazy adventures, but the goal is to get to this world's end and to get a peek of Aslan's land and Aslan's kingdom. Just a peek. Of course, Reepicheep, he wasn't going to settle just for a peek, right? He was bound and determined to hop on his little boat and get himself there. And then it ends up just with the sons of Adam and Eve, Edmund and Lucy and Eustace and Reepicheep, who end up in a boat, and they're traveling as close as they can get to Aslan's land. And Reepicheep drinks the water right near heaven, and what does he say about it? He says it's sweet. And the more they drank the water, what happened? They realized, I feel full. I feel as full as I've ever felt. I don't even need food. This water, they said, it's like drinking light. And the more they drank the water, the younger they got. And the more youthful and the stronger and the more vibrant they became. And the sun would get bigger and bigger and brighter, and they saw it more clear and clear and clear. And so the closer they got to heaven, the experiences became such that they were forgetting everything in the past. Forgetting that which is behind me, I do what? I press forward for what? The mark of that high calling. And that's our pilgrimage, right? We press forward, forgetting the past, to get to heaven, to be with Jesus. And so Christian and hopeful are right there, but they have to go through one more trial in order to make it. And that's the river of death. I saw that when they awoke, they prepared themselves to go up to the celestial city. But as I said before, the reflections of the sun on that city of pure gold were so extremely glorious that they couldn't face it directly, at least not yet. Instead, they used an instrument made specifically for the purpose. And as they moved forward, they met two men dressed in clothes shining like gold and whose faces glowed radiantly. And these angels asked the pilgrims where they came from, and they told them. And they also asked them where they had visited and what difficulties, dangers, comforts, and pleasures they had encountered. Christian and hopeful told them about their adventures along the way. Have you noticed how important everyone's testimony is in a Pilgrim's Progress? How important is everybody's story? And we all have a story. Each and every one of us have a story to tell about God's saving grace. And those stories are what keeps us on the path, and those stories help others. It's really important that you consider that. The angel said, well, you just have two more difficulties to overcome before you can gain entrance into the city. And Christian and hopeful ask, will you guide us the rest of the way? The angels were willing to assist them, but told them, you must complete the journey by your own what? Faith. not your own strength, not your good deeds, not your good works. The only way you can complete the last stage of this journey is by your faith. That's really important. I saw in my dream that they traveled together until they came in sight of the gate of the city. And between them and the gate there was a very deep river, but there was no bridge to cross over to the other side. The pilgrims were stunned by the sight of this daunting and formidable river. But the angel said, "You must go through this river, or else you cannot arrive at the gate of the city." Now, what does the river represent? It represents all of our physical death. It represents that time when we will die. And when it comes to the point of your physical death, whether it happens sooner or later, suddenly or it's prolonged, as you breathe your last breaths, what is the one thing and the only thing that matters? Your faith in Jesus Christ. In those moments, nothing else matters. It doesn't matter how much money you leave behind, what you've accomplished, what you've done, what you haven't done, how many people even know you're dying or even care. Nothing matters. Those last breaths, the only thing that matters is your faith. And that's what the river represents, right? I saw in my dream that they traveled together until they came in sight of the city, and between him there was this big bridge no one could cross. The pilgrims were stunned. They said, "Is there any other way to the gate other than going through death?" And the angel said, "Yes, but no one's been allowed to travel that way since the foundation of the world, except for two men, Enoch and Elijah." And what happened to Enoch and Elijah? They didn't die. They were raptured. The others, they won't die. They'll be raptured at the last trumpet. But everybody else, we got to die. We have to physically die. Well, at the thought of death, the pilgrims began to lose heart, especially Christian. They looked around but found no easier route that would allow them to avoid the river. So they asked the question, "Is the water all the same depth?" And the angel said, "No." But they offered no further guidance on the matter except to say, "You'll find it deeper or shallower according to" what? "Your trust in the King of this place." So the smaller your faith, the what? The deeper the river of death. The stronger your faith, the shallower the river of death. But you all got to die. Everybody's got to die. Everybody's got to die. And one of our prayers should be, it's one of my prayers, is that I would simply wade across the river of death, because my faith will be that strong. My faith will be that strong. And the thing is, as we'll see, whether your faith is lacking in those last moments or strong, you're still going to make it through. You're still going to make it through. Like little faith. He still made it. He still made it. But what would it be? We recently buried Mr. Vern, who actually came to faith very late in his life. And he had been an alcoholic most of his life. But he came to know Jesus, and his life changed, and he was a real joy. If you knew Mr. Vern here at Open Door, he loved to sing, and he loved to talk, and he died not too long ago. And when the men of his care group went to Mr. Vern's apartment, they sang hymns, because Mr. Vern loved to sing. And Mr. Vern, he could hardly speak because his lungs were so clogged. He smiled and he said, "I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go." Mr. Vern, he tiptoed across the river. Some people almost drowned like Christian, as we'll see. Now, seeing no other option, the pilgrims decided to press forward and enter into the water. Immediately, Christian began to sink, and he cried out to his good friend, hopeless, "I'm sinking in deep waters. The billows are rolling over my head, and the waves are crashing down on me." Hopeful replied, "Be courageous, my brother. I feel the bottom and it's firm." So, it's like, if you ever been in a pool with someone who can't swim, and they're thrashing around, you're thrashing around, and you're like standing in the water, and you're going, "Hey, just put your feet down." But Christian continued to panic and spluttered, "The sorrows of death have totally surrounded me, and I will not see the land that flows from milk and honey." And with that, a great darkness and sense of horror fell over Christian, so that he could not see anything ahead of him. In those moments, he lost his sight of heaven, and he was totally panicked. He thought in those moments, my sin is going to get the best of me, even as I stand right before the gates of heaven. My sin is still going to get the best of me. He couldn't see anything ahead of him. To a large degree, he lost his senses, and he could not remember or talk clearly about any of the blessings or encouragement that he had experienced while traveling on his pilgrimage. Rather, everything he said revealed terrifying thoughts and fears that he would die in that river and never gain entrance into the celestial city. The two angels who stood by observed that he was haunted with thoughts of sins that he had committed, both before and after he had become a pilgrim, as well as disturbing visions of demons and evil spirits. His words reflected this over and over again. And these angels are just sitting there looking at him going, "Why are you allowing this to take place?" Hopeful struggled to keep his brother's head above water. And sometimes Christian would come close to drowning, and then after a while he would rise up to the surface again, almost dead. And Hopeful tried his best to comfort him, calling out, "Brother, I see the gate and men standing to receive us." But Christian would answer dolefully, "Oh, it's you, Hopeful, that they're waiting for. You've been hopeful ever since I've known you." "And so have you," responded Hopeful, doing his best to encourage his friend. "Ah, brother," Christian said, gasping for air, "surely if I were right with the king, he would come to my rescue. But on account of my sins, he has brought me into the snare and abandoned me." "My brother," Hopeful pleaded, "you have quite forgotten the scripture where it speaks of the wicked. There are no pains in their death, but their strength is firm. They are not troubled as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. These troubles and distresses that you're experiencing in these waters are not indicating that God has abandoned you. Rather, they are sent to test you to see whether or not you will recall the promises of God and rely on Him in your present trial." Right? That's all we have. At those moments before our bodies breathe their last breath, all we have is to rely on Jesus. And to rely on Jesus is all we need, right? It's all we need. Hopeful notice that Christian was deep in thought, so he continued to speak, "Be courageous. Jesus Christ makes you whole." With that, Christian exclaimed with a loud voice, "Oh, I see him again. And he tells me, when you pass through the waters, I'll be with you. And when you go through the rivers, they will not overflow you." Suddenly, they both became courageous, and after that, the enemy was still as a stone and could no longer hinder them. Christian now found solid ground to stand on, and the two of them simply waded through the rest of the river of death on the shallow river, and they simply crossed over. And Bunyan says, we're all going to die physically. But I hope when we do, that we will die with our faith strong, and that we will die courageously. Now we finally get to the end. But one last minor obstacle. As they arrived on the other side of the riverbank, once again, Christian and hopeful saw the two angels waiting to welcome them as they came out of the river. The angels greeted them, saying, "We are ministering spirits sent forth to serve those who will be heirs of salvation." What does it mean to be an heir? It means you're an owner. You receive an inheritance. Everything that heaven is, you own. It becomes yours. Then they all proceeded toward the gate. Now, it's worth noting that the city stood on a mighty hill. City on a hill. But the pilgrims ascended that hill with ease because they had two angels leading them up and holding their arms. Plus, they had left all their mortal clothes behind them, right? They've died physically, and now they are free to be with the Lord. For although they went in the river with them, they came out without them. To be absent from the body is to be. They continued to climb with much agility and speed, even though the foundation upon which the city was built was higher than the clouds. They went up through the regions of air, sweetly talking as they went, being comforted because they had safely crossed the river and had such glorious companions to escort them. They talked with the angels about the splendor of this place, and the angels told the pilgrims that the beauty and glory of it were simply inexpressible. In Mount Zion, the angel said, you will find the heavenly Jerusalem, an innumerable company of angels, and the spirits of just men made perfect. The spirits of just men made perfect. What does that mean? Yeah. They are glorified. They are glorified. And first their spirits are glorified, and then later their bodies will be glorified. Right? So, if you ever have a conversation with a friend, or you can have this conversation with your spouse, you can look them in the eye and say, I'm perfect. I just need a little bit more time. And you're not lying. You are perfect. Just give it a little time. You're going now, they said, to the paradise of God, where you will see the tree of life and eat of its never fading fruits. When you arrive, you'll be given white robes, and you will walk and talk with the King every day throughout eternity. The angels continued, there you will never again see such things as you saw when you were in the lower regions upon the earth, including sorrow and sickness, affliction and death. For the former things are passed away. Behold, all things become new. Rather, you are going now to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and the prophets, men whom God has taken away from the evil to come, and who are now at rest, each one walking in his righteousness. We're to walk in the Spirit and not in the flesh. In heaven, we will walk in our righteousness. What will we do in that holy city? Christian and hopeful asked. There you will receive comforts from all your toil, and you will have joy in that place of your sorrow. You will reap what you have sown, even the fruit of your prayers, tears, and sufferings for the King along the way. Every single thing that you do now, that brings glory to God, will be rewarded in heaven. So, things like what? What does it say? Prayers, worship, loving God. Every time you love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself, the Lord will remember that, and you'll be rewarded. You'll be rewarded. I want you to think about what heavenly rewards are. And I want you to then recognize how important so many of the little things that we do are. Praying for a friend. Praying for somebody. There's a lot much more going on than you realize. You know, in heaven you'll be rewarded for praying for that friend. Just doing a little thing to help somebody. Handing out food in the food pantry. What's taking place is more than you just loving your neighbor. What's taking place is you are creating a treasure in heaven that one day that you'll enjoy. Everything you do unselfishly, everything that you do not for the sake of self, but for the sake of others, these are treasures that we're storing up in heaven. It's a beautiful thing. And we're gonna, in heaven, we're gonna just have so much enjoyment, but I think we're gonna be surprised when we get to heaven that some people that we knew on earth are gonna have just a giant mountain of treasure. We're gonna be like, whoa. Because most likely on earth, no one would have ever even recognized what a treasure that person was, or the treasures that they were storing. I think it's going to be a joyful shock for all of us, you know. And that's what we'll do in heaven. We'll enjoy them. You will also serve the one whom you desired to serve in the world with much difficulty because of the weakness of your flesh. So we get to serve in heaven, but it won't be difficult. We won't complain about it. We'll want to do it. And you will do so with continuous praise and shouting and thanksgiving. There your eyes will be delighted with seeing him, and your ears with hearing and the pleasant voice of the Mighty One. There you will enjoy your friends again who arrived before you, and in the same way you will welcome everyone with joy who follows you into the holy place. There also you will be clothed with glory and majesty and appropriately equipped to ride out with the King of glory when he comes in the clouds with the sound of the trumpet upon the wings of the wind. And you will come with him when he sits upon the throne of judgment, and you will sit by him when he passes the sentence upon all the workers of iniquity, whether angels or men. You will also have a voice in that judgment, because they were both his and your enemies as well. Also, when he again returns to the city, you will go with him and with the sound of the trumpet and be with him forever. And tomorrow, I'm actually preaching from Revelation 20 on this event. It's called the Great White Throne Judgment. And one of the most amazing things about this judgment is we will be there judging those that Christ assigns to the eternal lake of fire. And we will give Christ glory for doing so. It's something we have to contemplate. Now, as they were drawing near the gate, a company of the heavenly host came out to meet him. To this multitude, the two angels said, "These are the men who have loved the Lord when they were in the world, and they've left all for his holy name, and he sent us to fetch them. And we have brought them this far on their desired journey, so that they may now go in and look at their Redeemer in the face with joy." The heavenly host gave a great shout, saying, "Blessed are they who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb." Revelation 19. At the same time, several of the king's trumpeters also came out to meet them, and they had white shining clothes, and with loud melodious noises they made even the heavens to echo with their sound. These trumpeters greeted Christian and hopeful with 10,000 welcomes from the world, and they did this with shouting and with the sound of trumpets. Afterwards, the angels surrounded them on every side. Some of them went in front, and some behind, and some on the right, and some on the left, as guards through the upward regions. And as they went, they continued making melodious noise and lofty notes to all who could see. It was as if heaven itself came down to meet them. And as they walked on together, these trumpeters would often with joyful sound combine their music with looks and gestures to signify to Christian and hopeful just how welcome the pilgrims were and how helpful they were to meet them. So the angels are looking at them going, "Good job. Way to go, you made it." You know, smile emojis. And it was as if these two pilgrims were already in heaven. Now here they also had a better view of the city of itself, and they thought they had heard all the bells ringing in the city to welcome them inside, but above all, they were consumed with the warm and joyful thoughts about living there for all eternity with such heavenly company. It's all they wanted. It's all that they needed. Oh, with what language or pen could they express their glorious joy as they arrived at the gate? And when they came up to the gate, there was inscribed over it letters of gold. "Blessed are those who obey his commandments, that they might have the right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates of the city." Why does it say, "Blessed are those who obey his commandments"? What does that have to do with faith? Because remember, it was only because of faith that they got to that place. But now it says, to enter into the gates, blessed are those who keep the commandments. Why? Yes, if you love me, you will keep my commands. Remember, faith and obedience go hand in hand. They cannot be separated. And even in heaven, we will be recognized for our obedience. We will be recognized for the deeds done in righteousness. Then I saw in my dream the angels told them to call out to the gate. And when they did, some looked over the gate, namely Enoch, Moses, and Elijah. And they were told, "These pilgrims have come from the city of destruction for the love they have for the king and this place." Then each pilgrim handed their certificate. And what did the certificate represent? The assurance of their salvation that they had kept in their chest pocket and that they had received at the very beginning of their journey. And these were carried to the king. And when the king, that's Jesus, who when he read them, He said, where are these guys? Let them in. They're standing outside the gate, was the answer. And the king commanded that the gate to be open and declare, the righteous nation that keeps truth may enter in. Reminded of Psalm 24 here as well. Now I saw in my dream that Christian and hopeful went in the gate, and as they entered, they were suddenly transfigured and arrayed in clothes that shone like gold. And some of the inhabitants of the city met them and provided them harps and crowns, and the harps were given for worship. And that may be a guitar for you, a drum, if you're not big into harpistry, whatever your favorite instrument is. And crowns were given as a token of honor. Then I heard in my dreams all the bells in the city ring again for joy, and that it was said to the pilgrims, enter into the joy of your Lord. And I also heard Christian and hopeful sing with a loud voice, saying, blessing and honor and glory and power to him who sits upon the throne and to the Lamb forever and ever. That was the chorus of the 24 elders, if you recall, Revelation 4. Just as the gates were opened to them, the men inside, to let the men inside, I looked in after them and witnessed the city shining like the sun. The streets were also paved with gold, like many men walked on them, with crowns on their heads, palms in their hands, and golden harps to sing praises with forever. There were also some angelic beings with wings that responded in never-ending praise, saying, holy, holy, holy is the Lord. These are the great seraphim. Then I watched them shut the gates and wished I too was among them. And when I was watching all of this happen, I turned my head, and here's this one last scary scene that, interestingly enough, is also recorded in the very last chapter of the Bible. The Bible talks all about the glories of heaven. At the very end, there's like this one last scary scene as a reminder for those who are still yet those who still remain in unbelief and in rebellion. And I saw ignorance who had come up to the riverbank. He soon crossed over it with half the difficulty of Christian because he had no understanding of his sin. So it looks like he just walks right across. And as it turned out, the one called Vain Hope, the ferryman, was there, and he is the one who actually helped ignorance cross the river. Then I saw ignorance ascend the hill, just like the others, and he even arrived at the celestial city. Only he came alone, and no one met him to offer the least bit of encouragement. And when he reached the gate, he looked up with the others, that which was inscribed above it, and he begins to knock, assuming the gates would just fly open. But the men peered over the top of the gate and they asked, where'd you come from? And what is it that you desire? He replied, hey, I've eaten and drunk in the presence of the king. And he has taught me in our streets. Many on that day will say to me, what? Lord, Lord, I knew you. I ate with you. I was taught by you. Let me in, Lord. I know you. And what did Jesus say? He would say, depart from me, you doer of sin. I never. There's the key word. The key word is, Jesus would say to them, I never knew you. There was never a time that you were a Christian. There was never a time that you were a follower. You thought you were, but I have never known you. So they asked Ignorance for his certificate so they might go and show it to the king. Ignorance fumbles around his chest pocket. You ever been in that situation where it's always been, it's right here, maybe you're thinking, what excuse can I give at this moment because I don't have what's being asked of me? He found nothing. The men of the gate said, "Do you not have the certificate?" And Ignorance just stood there speechless. The men informed the king that Ignorance was at the gate, but he would not come down and see him. Instead, he commanded the two angels who had welcomed Christian and Hopeful to the city to go out and take Ignorance and bind his hands and feet and cast him out. The angels took Ignorance up and carried him through the air to the door that had been seen in the side of the hill below the Delectable Mountains, and he put him in there. And then I realized that there was a way to hell, even from the very gate of heaven, as well as from the city of destruction. So I awoke and saw that all of this had been a dream. Now, reader, I have told my dream to you, so if you can interpret it to me, or to yourself, or a neighbor, but pay attention, of misinterpreting, for that instead of doing good, you will but yourself abuse by misinterpreting, evil ensues. Pay attention also that you do not become extreme in playing with the outside of my dream, nor let my figure or similitude put you into laughter or start a feud. Leave this for boys and fools, but as for you, do yourself the substance of my matter see. Open the curtains, look within my veil, turn up my metaphors, and do not fail. If you seek them, such things to find as will be helpful to an honest mind. What of my waste you find there, be bold to throw away, but yet preserve the gold. What if my apple be wrapped up in ore? None throws away the apple for the core. But if you should cast all away as vain, I will not, but it will make me dream. I know not, but it will make me dream again. So don't forget the dream. And even Bunyan says, if some of this I got wrong, throw that away, but keep the gold. Keep that what is true. Well, just a few minutes and then we'll pray. Let's talk about some takeaways from our time in reading this wonderful story. If maybe 5 or 6 of you will share, what are you taking away from this? What's that? Yeah, being a Christian at times is very hard. And that's a very good lesson, Alex. And you know what? It's supposed to be. It's one thing to encounter a difficulty, a hardship, and be surprised by it. It's another thing when you know it's supposed to be. And this story helps us to realize that at times Christianity is hard. It's supposed to be. Why is that a help? Yeah, because there's purposes for it. There's purposes for the difficulty. To strengthen our faith, to increase our dependence. Sure. Very good. What else? What's the takeaway? Yeah, how important it is to have the body of Christ, the church, and Christian friends to help you in the journey. You cannot do Christianity alone. I've been saying this 22 years in this church. It cannot be done. You cannot do Christianity alone. That's why we make such importance in body life and small groups and our care groups. We absolutely need each other. What else?
Don't forget to look at the map.
Yes. You got the map, you know. We all have the map. Just look at it. Right. Yeah. And it's funny how few people actually read the Bible. It really is amazing to me how few people read the Bible. They just don't think they need the map. What else?
Discipline. God loves us so much, He disciplines.
Yes, yeah. If God did not discipline us, we wouldn't belong to Him. To those He loves, He reproves. Yeah. Anything else?
I think scripture, like verses like Hebrew 11:1, that we know there's hope in God's word, that faith in Jesus is to be sure
Yeah,
of what we hope for and what we can't see.
yeah,
To be certain of it.
yeah. Amen.
Count everything as lost and surpassing worth of knowing.
Yes, yes. Everything else is worthless compared to that surpassing knowledge of Christ and what is in store for us. Yeah. And again, let me just repeat this. Your journey as a pilgrim is different than mine. And that's okay. That's okay. It is the Lord who directs our steps. Many are the plans in a person's mind, but the Lord determines our steps. Your journey may not be mine, but yours is the right one. He has paved for you a way to heaven. Stay on the path. Father, thank you that Christ, your Son, walked His path through the cross, and then, of course, through the resurrection. Now, I pray that we would imitate Him and we would walk our paths. As you chart them, help us to stay on that straight and narrow way. Help us to overcome the challenges, the doubts, the fears, Satan and all of his forces that will try to oppose us and pull us away and lead us down the path of destruction. Father, keep us on the straight and narrow. And help us to see your celestial city. Give us in our mind's eye, in the eyes of our heart, that picture of glory of heaven to come, so that we will run the race and not grow weary. And I pray, Father, that this study would be not just a good reminder, but a powerful strengthening for our souls. And I pray also that we would become hopeful to other Christians, that might be our role for other Christians who go weary and think they can't make it, that we would be like that friend, hopeful to another. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you all so much for being a part of this. This has been one of the few COVID joys of mine, and I'm glad that you participated. Everybody who is watching the video and enjoyed the reading with us, thank you as well. God bless.